President Joe Biden, after one term in office, he was unable to attain a second term due to his age undermining his ability to run a competent campaign, meaning he had Harris take his place. Harris then proceeded to lose, and now Joe Biden is entering the history books as a one-term president. That doesn't necessarily mean that nothing can be achieved in a single term. I think the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act are going to trickle down and have effects for years to come, long after President Biden has laid his eyes closed for the last time. I think that President Biden, for example, putting the cap on insulin prices, opening the conversation more when it comes to, taking steps forward when it comes to negotiating drug prices with companies on behalf of the government to get better prices for consumers when it comes to the captive market of medicine, which people need to live. There's real achievements during the Biden term, but obviously with it being restrained to one term and Trump coming in with the Senate, the House, and the executive branch and the Supreme Court, there's a good possibility that he's going to undo a lot of certainly the more semi-progressive or semi-left-wing policies that Biden implemented and change and progress he made in his time in office. Anyway, so when it comes to how much of Biden's legislative agenda, domestic legislative agenda, has been achieved, and how much is going to be able to stand the test of time, like not only like how much has been achieved now, but how much will actually be able to be enshrined, the achievements will be protected and not undone by the next administration, it's hard to say. The foreign policy conversation is even more blotchy, with the ceasefire now finally being negotiated between Hamas and the Israeli government. Whether or not it's going to be able to hold is another question. Hopefully it'll be passed over to the next administration and it will be maintained. But again, just like the domestic agenda, this is completely dependent upon the actions of the incoming administration. Biden is passing the ball over. Same when it comes to following up Ukraine aid. Of course, I can get into specifics of how Biden should have rushed aid on this issue faster. Long-range strike capacity and attack should have been sent sooner when supporting the 2023 counteroffensive. You give people capabilities to get a job done. You don't just slowly drip it out like a lawyer. You want to give them tools to get the job done. You want somebody to hammer a nail, you give them a hammer. You want somebody to penetrate Russian lines, you help them just, damage Russian logistics. You help them hit the Russians behind the line so it's difficult to support their troops on the front. That's NATO planning against Russia, and it makes no sense that we would expect the Ukrainians to operate no different, especially during that 2023 counteroffensive when they're going against just strong lines. And I can go into any individual instance and the critique here, but again, Biden passed multiple supplementals. Biden sent a decent amount of aid to Ukraine. Biden loosened up policy when it comes to sharing not only of intelligence, but eventually, even if it was a little late, long-range strike capacity. So again, he's passing the baton when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Israel, when it comes to domestic policy. While not all of this can completely be undone by Trump. For example, it's going to be pretty hard for Trump to redeploy us in Afghanistan. And it's Trump cannot drag us back into C-19 territory, but a decent amount of this is still up in the air, and so we won't really know the full impact of the Biden presidency until probably decades into the future, when we can look back and see how it intersects with the presidency that comes after Donald Trump in 2028, how much stands the test of time, and how exactly the Israel-Palestine, at least this wave of fighting around that war ends, how the war in Ukraine ends, and how, many of these legislative achievements are able to stand the test of time. So exactly grading Joe Biden's presidency at this point is kind of a fool's errand. And that's not to say that you can't grade anything. I can't talk about insulin cap. I can't talk about having a pretty good labor relations board. I can't talk about the failures on sending aid not fast enough. I can't talk about not making, a public option a prominent part of his administration. I can get into these specifics, but until we can look back and see what holds and what doesn't, it's kind of hard to grade Biden's presidency. But I'll try to give some version of a letter grade, because this is the type of, you know, people like scales, people like systems to grade presidents in comparison to each other. So I'll do my best, but also take this into consideration that this is not like grading Theodore Roosevelt or FDR, where we can look back. I mean, Biden's still technically president for at least 4 more days. So let's check it out. And by the way, if you look around him, you can see that all the pictures around him are pictures of his family, which continues to hold that Biden's main priority, if not one of his top priorities, is his family as a massive family man. I think that's Hunter to the right. I'm looking for Beau Biden, which I can't see. He might be on the picture on the left in the group picture.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from the Oval Office. Before I begin, let me speak to important news from earlier today. After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, by my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration.
So, for those of you who don't know the terms of the deal, let me say the terms quick, or like the bare bones terms, and let him talk for a little bit, and we'll talk about who gets credit for this, because that's the main debate about this, apparently, in the fallout of this. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. So, the terms of the deal is that the Israelis get 33 hostages. In exchange, they give 100 I don't want to say high ranking, but, you know, life sentence. Yeah, that's actually the term for it. Life sentence. So that means Palestinians sentenced to life sentences in prison, 100 of them exchanged for the 33, on top of 1,000 other prisoners that are not given life sentences and were not involved in the October 7th attacks. That is another asterisk that the Israelis insisted be put on it, in order for them to get the first 33 hostages. There's also a dialogue about when this fighting stops, which is tomorrow on Friday when it's supposed to freeze, about the withdrawal of Israeli troops from certain areas. But you can see that it's a framework for a ceasefire to allow a prisoner exchange to take place. And if it is successful, then it can allow a framework for future prisoner exchanges to take place. And the way that Biden has designed it is that, let's say that they exchange 33 prisoners, then they exchange another 20 prisoners, and then they reach a snack point. And this could be anywhere. It could be, for example, the Israeli public does not want to release a certain Palestinian terrorist that engage in a targeting of civilians that has a life sentence that the Palestinians are demanding for future exchanges. It could be that the Hamas looks at it like, oh, we don't want to give up these last 20 prisoners or these last 20 hostages and then have no more leverage, so that, we wait a week, ceasefire ends, and then Israel comes bearing down upon us when we have no more hostage leverage, which they have held for the entirety of this war. So if any of those scenarios kind of come to pass, as long as neither side actively goes out there and breaks the ceasefire, i.e. invades, attack, etc., then technically the ceasefire holds as long as they continue to negotiate. So that would mean that even if the ceasefire runs out, let's say ceasefire ends February 20th, and, it's February 21st, as long as the Israeli authorities and the Palestinian authorities and intermediaries are continuing to negotiate to try to get more hostages out, and to try to extend the ceasefire or find a longer-term solution, then the ceasefire will extend until a solution is found or it is otherwise broken, which I do think is good. As for who gets credit to this, whether or not Biden or Trump deserves credit, I'll leave that to the side for a moment as we let Biden continue speaking.
That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans. This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office.
He seems to have changed topics. I think it's a combination of factors. And I think on one hand, giving all the credit to Trump is pretty silly when you think about the logic of it, but also giving all the credit to Biden would also be pretty silly. So here's my perspective. I think that it is likely that Donald Trump coming into the White House, we have gotten some reports that he has sent some envoys to Israel, And Trump's perspective is he wants the violence to end. It's, you know, it would be a good image if he walked into the White House and the violence, by the time he gets in there, is over, and he can not only project himself as Israel's protector, which he has worked very hard to do, and Sheldon Adelson trusts him to do, but also as the peacemaker, the peace bringer. And he's not going to be able to achieve that with Ukraine in 4 days like he promised to again and again and again and again and again on the campaign trail. And so, I mean, like, this is the only conflict he can. And if he can't achieve it for either of them, well, then that promise or that commitment, whatever you want to call it, on the campaign trail just kind of rings completely hollow, doesn't it? Anyway, I think that the idea of Trump coming in and also not necessarily from a position on peace talks that is in Netanyahu's corner. Trump and Netanyahu have had a testy relationship in the past, even if Trump is very, very devoted to Israel's protection. I think that puts some leverage maybe against the Israelis towards holding this out and making this last out longer if Trump isn't necessarily going to be vibing with the whole operation and they want to continue to keep his support. But also on the other side, this is Biden's framework. And so giving Trump credit for Biden's framework eventually getting through and saying, congratulations, you helped Biden. Well, it's Biden's framework. This isn't Trump's framework. It isn't his peace deal. He didn't negotiate it. None of his cronies negotiated it. He hasn't been the one talking to intermediaries.
Morally
so, I mean, it's Biden's framework. So, I mean, I don't know who gets the credit in its entirety. In fact, I don't even know if Americans should be the primary ones deserving of credit. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I think it's likely that that credit probably just lies elsewhere outside of the continental United States. But if we're talking about inside the continental United States, it's not so clear. Kazium, thank you so much for the primer. Site chat is superior. True, even when it is down, site chat is superior.
From this desk as president, and I've been thinking a lot about who we are and maybe more importantly, who we should be. Long ago, in New York Harbor, an iron worker installed beam after beam, day after day. He was joined by steel workers, stonemasons, engineers. They built not just a single structure, but a beacon of freedom. The very idea of America was so big, we felt the entire world needed to see. The Statue of Liberty, a gift from France after our Civil War. Like the very idea of America, it was built not by one person, but by many people from every background and from around the world. Like America, the Statue of Liberty is not standing still. Her foot literally steps forward atop a broken chain of human bondage. She's on the march, and she literally moves. She was built to sway back and forth to withstand the fury of stormy weather, to stand the test of time because storms are always coming. She sways a few.
Is that true that it was built slightly to sway, or is that just cope for the fact that they couldn't stop it from swaying? They're like, sure, it's to represent, choppy waters for the Republic. Yeah, that's why it sways at a gust of wind.
But she never falls into the current below. An engineering marvel.
Remember when I started filming in Ukraine for the first time, I did a lot of below shots, and I liked shooting from below. I liked how it looked, but then I remember, but also it was easier because holding your arm up like this, like hours and hours and hours after an interview, you just can't do it. And so just letting it dangle like with a neck, like a necklace around my neck was like easiest. And then afterwards, there was this Soviet filmographer I was talking to, so somebody who was like worked in Soviet film during the Union. I also talked to another guy who was working in Lebanon in film as well, and we both got the same thing from them. And they said, "Hey, this is interesting. Are you shooting below to to increase expand the perspective on the subject being interviewed, and from this below shot you can make them look very heroic, and it's a very heroic angle. Is this to imply your perspective or your view on the people that you're filming, this below shot, this heroic shot, that you see these defenders, these aid workers, these firefighters, these medics as heroes?" And I said, "Sure, why not? That sounds good. That sounds better than my arm was tired, doesn't it?"
The Statue of Liberty is also an enduring symbol of the soul of our nation, a soul shaped by forces that bring us together and by forces that pull us apart. And yet, through good times and tough times, we've withstood it all. A nation of pioneers and explorers, of dreamers and doers, of ancestors native to this land, of ancestors who came by force, a nation of immigrants who came to build a better life, a nation holding the torch of the most powerful idea ever in the history of the world, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness, that democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power, but whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example, whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press, institutions that are rooted, they just might not reflect the timeless words, but they echo the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Rooted in the timeless words of the Constitution, we the people. Our system of separation of powers, checks and balances, it may not be perfect, but it's maintained our democracy for nearly 250 years, longer than any other nation in history that's ever tried such a bold experiment. In the past 4 years, our democracy has held strong. And every day I've kept my commitment to be president for all Americans through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. I've had a great partner in Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been the honor of my life to see the resilience of essential workers getting us through a once-in-a-century pandemic, the heroism of service members and first responders keeping us safe, the determination of advocates standing up for our rights and our freedoms instead of losing their jobs to an economic crisis that we inherited. Millions of Americans now have the dignity of work. Millions of entrepreneurs and companies creating new businesses and industries.
I think C-19 recovery is probably the one area where I'm most confident in saying Biden has a strong legacy in. We avoided a recession, with most economists predicted we were going to go into a recession. And it was like some even said it was almost like it's a done deal. It's going to happen. It's just a question of how painful it could be. And due to, you can call it, I don't care how libertarian you can be, Keynesian, evil Keynesian theory, he stimulated the economy. The program that he implemented helped us avoid a recession. And not only did it help us avoid a recession, but it also helped us bring down the unemployment rating. And it helped us get to a point where our growth rates were larger than they were pre-pandemic. And our job growth rates were larger than they were pre-pandemic, meaning that we grew jobs that weren't just like reclaiming jobs from the pandemic. We continue to grow jobs on top of that. This area, he's quite strong on. Now, this doesn't mean that this means every single economic indicator he's strong on. For example, large amounts of personal debt and credit card debt is still a massive issue in this country. And these are the types of things that might not immediately be taken into account when you look at large-scale economic indicators like GDP increases that, if you're at the kitchen table, do you 2.3% GDP increase? Oh my, woohoo. Wow, that really helped me. Not necessarily. Not if that growth was largely in the healthcare sector. Not if that growth was not in actually, I think some of it was in construction, so I can't say that. But if that growth was not in agriculture, which you work in, or the service industry, or wherever it was. Point is, though, I think post-COVID recovery is probably, as of right now, one of Biden's strongest legacies, as he did successfully lead us in the post-COVID recovery period.
Hiring American workers, using American products. And together, we've launched a new era of American possibilities. One of the greatest modernizations of infrastructure in our entire history. From new roads.
And you know, as much as I would want the infrastructure bill to be more ambitious, as much as I would want the Inflation Reduction Act to be more ambitious, they are ambitious. And when we talk about the largest sum of spending in climate infrastructure investment in our nation's history, while of course it could always be bigger, it is still the largest in our nation's history. It is record-setting. It is historic in our nation's history to invest in all of that electrical car infrastructure, to invest in all of that solar, to invest in all of that clean energy infrastructure. It's, again, always and forever, you're going to hear me always say, I want more here, I want more there. It's not enough, but this is something that could be defining for him if he isn't immediately followed by a president who denies that climate change is even a real issue, because it doesn't exist according to him. Somebody who could undo a lot of that progress. Now, look, I think there's other security reasons why, outside of climate change, why you would want green renewable alternatives. For example, you want to have a flexible, energy system with many alternatives. If one type of system does not work, if your gas pipes burst and you're unable to pipe gas in, or you're unable to access one certain type of energy, having other options is good, always good. But so maybe they won't completely undo everything, but this is the area that I worry the most. And it's also the area where we have the least amount of wiggle room to mess around in.
Bridges, clean water, affordable high-speed internet for every American. We invented the semiconductor, smaller than the tip of my little finger, and now is bringing those chip factories and those jobs back to America where they belong, creating thousands of jobs. Finally,
Tip of his little finger.
Giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for millions of seniors. And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low. Meeting our sacred obligation to over 1 million veterans so far who are exposed to toxic materials, and to their families, providing medical care and education benefits and more for their families. You know, it will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration, a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we've pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more.
The thing is, it is true that more people are on healthcare than ever, and they were able to get more people on, and that they helped cap insulin prices for seniors. And, you know, that's a good step forward. And, you know, negotiating drug prices, that was something Democrats have been talking about forever, and Biden was the one to pull that off. With a very slim majority, and everything needs to be understood in the context of an extremely slim legislative majority, this being achieved in those conditions in an age of quite harsh partisanship. But at the end of the day, he talked about a public option on the campaign trail. People were talking about a complete healthcare overhaul in this country. People were looking favorably upon proposals like Medicare for All, which is a radical reshuffling. And so Biden compromised, found this position between that, which like Bernie people and people like me were calling for at the time, and where we are currently, and he came to the position of a public option, like a step in the middle, a step forward. And he hasn't talked about it at all during his administration. I don't hear about it from any of his speeches. I don't hear about it from their press secretary, whether it was Jen Psaki or the new woman. I'm sorry, I can't believe I forgot her name. Sorry, but when you keep switching when you switch press secretaries, that happens. I haven't heard it from anywhere. And he made that statement on the campaign trail, and I understand that you don't have the legislative majority to do it, but you've got to show the vision for it in order to, you know, build the momentum for it. Whatever. Let's continue.
How much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've held my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example. I have no doubt that America is in a position to continue to succeed. That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. And this is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence.
An oligarchy
that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. They just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share.
Now, what for him made it so now we're developing into an oligarchy? Is it, I mean, the big thing that I would imagine is just how dominant Elon was in backing the right. That's not to say that that is the start or the end of any type of oligarchic development, but, and if, you know, and if we are on that pathway, it wouldn't be. That'd be silly to think Elon was the first. He isn't the first billionaire to get involved in politics, and he will not be the last, likely. But he was the one that, I mean, when you have such a dominant social media platform like X, and you take it over for what you said, you know, to the public, was to make it a nonpartisan, unbiased platform, and then turn it into basically MAGA campaign headquarters, making the Trump campaign ads like the front page every time, going out there and like paying tons of money to try to run their canvassing operation basically from scratch with no knowledge, donating tens upon tens of millions of dollars. It is quite a lot. And this isn't just any, you know, rich person. This is the richest man on the planet, after all. And as much as people would like to think that they're with the richest man on the planet in a movement to challenge the establishment, I would just like to pose that it is very, very possible that the richest man in the world, in fact, might himself be part of the establishment.
You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake. Right now, the existential threat of climate change has never been clearer. Just look across the country, from California to North Carolina. That's why I signed the most significant climate and clean energy law ever in the history of the world, and the rest of the world is trying to model it now. It's working, creating jobs and industries of the future. You know, we've proven we don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growing the economy. We're doing both. The powerful forces want to wield their unchecked influence to eliminate the steps we've taken to tackle the climate crisis, to serve their own interest for power and profit. We must not be bullied into sacrificing the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must keep pushing forward and push faster. There's no time to waste. It's also clear that American leadership in technology is an unparalleled source of innovation that can transform lives. We see the same dangers of the concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise.
Is Dylan even reading YouTube chat? No. How else would I have read that message? I would never read it.
Of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well.
A tech-industrial complex. See, this is a reference to Silicon Tech Pro, Silicon Valley, the amount of control and influence they have over social media, which dominates our everyday life, dominates our communication in the information age, which has introduced human brains to an amount of information, social and political, that we were never, ever, evolving in order to try to deal with at once. And as we're trying to deal with those, tugs and pulls, people are figuring out how to find every little node in your brain and use it to not only get you to buy products, but also to get you as angry as possible, and to get you to react to images, comments, posts, retweet, quote tweet, retruth, re-Facebook. I don't know what they say on Facebook. I don't even know if they even have a version of reposting on Facebook. But point is, they're cracking your brain in a way that most people really don't realize. Why do you think people always like, wait, why does this random website know exactly what I want? It's because they're taking the information from other companies, it's being sold to them, and then they're using that information to try to get to you, information they have about you, your likes, your interests, some of which you might even not completely consciously register. I've heard multiple stories of people finding out they were gay because they'd keep getting recommended gay, I don't know how to put it besides to be couth, gay products, because the type of social media TikTok images that they're staying on is they're staying on the men a little bit longer. Sometimes these algorithms know you better than you do, and so then you take that knowledge and then give it to somebody like, I don't know, Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, and then also make them partisan, make them directly participate in politics. Let one of them, for example, just completely throw off the veil of any type of political neutrality. I see where he thinks the threat could derive from, and information capture.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche.
Bop and Wap, thank you so much for the gifted tier 1. Appreciate it, buddy.
Of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence is the most consequential technology of our time, perhaps of all time. Nothing offers more profound possibilities and risks for our economy and our security, our society, for humanity. Artificial intelligence even has the potential to help us answer my call to end cancer as we know it. But unless safeguards are in place, AI could spawn new threats to our rights, our way of life, to our privacy, how we work, and how we protect our nation. We must make sure AI is safe and trustworthy and good for all humankind. In the age of AI, it's more important than ever that the people must govern. And as the land of liberty, America, not China, must lead the world in the development of AI. In the years ahead, it'll help to be, it's going to be up to the president, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, the free press, and the American people to to confront these powerful forces. We must reform the tax code, not by giving the biggest tax cuts to billionaires, but by making them begin to pay their fair share. We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year term limit, time and term, for the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune.
None of these are bad things. I mean, he's trying to basically take like a bunch of paper airplanes, write his wishes on them, and throw them down in the history and hope someone picks them up. Which, I mean, I don't really know how much this does. But, you know, if you're president for 5 more days, use the bully pulpit.
From crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute. And it shouldn't be. And in a democracy, there's another danger to the concentration of power and wealth. It erodes a sense of unity and common purpose. It causes distrust and division. Participating in our democracy becomes exhausting and even disillusioning. And people don't feel like they have a fair shot. We have to stay engaged in the process. I know it's frustrating. A fair shot is what makes America America. Everyone's entitled to a fair shot. Not a guarantee, but just a fair shot. An even playing field. Going as far as your hard work and talent can take you. We can never lose that essential truth, remain who we are. I've always believed, and I've told other world leaders, America can be defined by one word: possibilities. Only in America do we believe anything is possible. Like a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, sitting behind this desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. That's the magic of America. It's all around us. Upstairs in the residence of the White House, I've walked by a painting of the Statue of Liberty I don't know how many times. In the painting, there's several workers climbing on the outstretched arm of the statue that holds the torch. It reminds me every day I pass it of the story and soul of our nation and the power of the American people. There's a story of a veteran. This is a veteran, the son of an immigrant, whose job was to climb that torch and polish the amber panes so rays of light could reach out as far as possible. He was known as the keeper of the flame. He once said of the Statue of Liberty.
What a cool job title. My goodness. Previous employment? Oh, yeah, 15 years working in New York City. Yeah, what was your job? Oh, I was the city's keeper of the flame. What did that entail? Everything.
Quote, speaks a silent universal language, one of hope, that anyone who seeks and speaks freedom can understand. Yes, we sway back and forth to withstand the fury of the storm, to stand the test of time. A constant struggle, a short distance between peril and possibility. But what I believe is the America of our dreams is always closer than we think. And it's up to us to make our dreams come true. Let me close by stating my gratitude to so many people, to the members of my administration, as well as public service and first responders across the country and around the world. Thank you for stepping up to serve. To our service members and your families, it's been the highest honor of my life to lead you as Commander-in-Chief. And of course to Kamala and our incredible partner, the historic Vice President. She and Doug have become like family, and to me, family's everything. My deepest appreciation to our amazing First Lady who's with me in the Oval today, for our entire family. You're the love of my life and the lives of my love. My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all. And may God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.
Okay, 17-minute speech. Biden did fumble and mumble a little bit here and there, but I think it mostly stayed on the train tracks. All of it was cogent. All of it was coherent. And so there wasn't any big flubs of that style. This is going to be the last speech of Biden's presidency. So this is his farewell to the country. He is still president for about the next 100 to 120, like 20-something hours. So it's not like he's immediately leaving the White House. If something happens in the next few days, of course, he's still president. But this is his last time widely addressing the nation, him getting to set, like, a list of things to say and get to speak to the people about what his priorities was as president, what he thinks the country should do in the future, and how he reflects on his time in public service and the country's position and problems moving forward. So this is the last time he'll be able to do that while president of the United States. Shortly after leaving the White House in 4 to 5 days, President Biden is going to get on an aircraft and he is going to head to California, where he is going to be relaxing and vacationing with his family following his exiting of the White House in order to, quote unquote, decompress after being president for 4 years. And so, yep, that's that. So again, I think that in order to purely judge Biden's presidency, to really distill it down to what it is, it's going to take not 4 years. It'll probably take a decade or two, if not more, if not much more, to truly understand what Biden's presidency meant for this country. Because Biden got elected on a general mandate of a return to normalcy. People want to change from the chaos of the Trump years, the mismanagement of C-19, the constant scandals, the constant ridiculousness and turning of our nation into a reality TV show, where every single day we were waking up with some idea of like, oh God, what is he going to say today? What is he going to tweet out? Is it going to hurt the stock market? Is it going to cause an international crisis? Due to not only a lack of experience, but also a basic lack of self-restraint. A basic lack of self-restraint. And so Biden was elected on this mandate of a return to normalcy, of an end to that era of chaos, so that we can get back on the track of the long arch of progress, so to speak. That was the Biden mandate. Now, to be clear, that's not all Biden was. Biden was also seen, at least along the Democratic Party, maybe not amongst the majority of the country's union rank and file, but Biden, projected himself as a very strong pro-worker, pro-union candidate. And when you look at his labor relations board, when you look at the times that he injected himself into union debates and union conversations, while it wasn't fiercely pro-union in every single instance, he certainly arched more pro-union than many other recent presidents, and certainly the next man to enter the Oval Office. And so there are other factors like that pushed Biden. But the main theme of his campaign was an end to the chaos, a return to responsible statecraft and responsible state management, and a return to normalcy, so that the American people do not need to worry about what the president is going to be doing every week, and they can go about their daily lives. Now, if that was the Biden pitch on the campaign trail, that is not really how it ended up panning out. That's not to say that Biden didn't return boring to politics I mean, of course, there was interesting moments in the Biden administration, but I mean, he did do that. He did, to a large extent, on a lot of areas and a lot of issues. Americans, if they wanted to, they could check out. They could check out in a way that they maybe would not be able to before. But if Donald Trump is able to re-enter, like they performed well in the midterms, so in 2022 they do well, but if Trump re-enters in 2024, the partisanship is still very, very bad. His secondary pitch of uniting the country and bringing down the partisan divides hasn't really made a significant amount of progress. What are we supposed to reflect on this now with Trump winning re-election and with partisanship still high? Because Trump is not going to bring normalcy. Trump is going to smash normalcy. Trump is suing pollsters who gave him bad poll results during the election. And he's doing that after winning. Trump is continuing to talk about, after winning, going after his political opponents. He's continuing to talk about it. Donald Trump has talked about suspending the U.S. Constitution to reinstate him as president. He continues to deny the results of the 2020 election, even after winning the 2024 election. Meaning that while he controlled the apparatuses of power in 2020, he lost. But when Biden controlled and Harris controlled the apparatus of power in 2024, he won. Work that out. Good luck. Too big to rig. So I don't think we're going to be able to return to normalcy. I think the partisanship is still going to be as bad as ever. I think Trump is going to still have maybe not as much chaos as the first term. It depends, because on one hand you could say, well, he was president for 4 years, so he has 4 years experience, so he's going to be a little bit more steady-handed. He's a little bit older now. He's going, into his 80s and such, and if he's taking the mantle back up, he's going to have more of an idea of what he wants to do, and so it's going to be more steady. But on the other hand, you could look at it like the adults in the room, that was the pitch last time. The pitch this time is that there's no adults in the room, so it could actually be worse. Who knows? Who knows? But I don't think the return of normalcy is happening. I think that there's going to be a decent amount of chaos in the administration as well. So I don't think that has necessarily been achieved. I think some of our institutions, for example, when it comes to the powers of the vice president during the transition process, have been strengthened. So that is a positive. That is certainly a positive. And if Trump won a second term, I don't know how likely that strengthening of the institutions could have been possible. Some of it even bipartisan. Yeah, hell, even Marco Rubio, who is going to be Secretary of State soon, made it so it's more difficult for the President of the United States to unilaterally withdraw from NATO. So Biden cannot take the mantle of returning normalcy. Biden cannot take the mantle of the end of Trumpism. Biden cannot return the mantle of the ending of the Trump chaos. Maybe a pause. You can say a pause of the Trump chaos to help clean up the mess of C-19, etc. But that cannot be his mantle. So what is Biden's mantle? What is Biden's mantle? Isn't it just to be like, oh, like he's Jimmy Carter now? Well, again, I think a lot of it is going to be in the historic things that were done during his presidency with the slim majority that otherwise, if it wasn't due to either Biden's deep knowledge of the legislative levers, if somebody else was in there, we don't know if it would have gotten through. And so I have to just think of it from a policy perspective in the waves created by that. The infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are the pieces of legislation that I think can positively define Biden's legacy for the impact it has on the country going forward. As for what the presidency will be defined in popular culture, I think for the immediate future, it's going to be seen as a pause in the Trump years, as a temporary pause between first and second Trump term. And I think in a lot of the biographies and documentaries and such about the Trump era, it's going to be displayed as such. Whether it keeps that perception in the long term depends upon how the Trump era ends. Progressive language in the service of self-serving cynicism is no progress at all. What is this reference to?